Hi guys, it's Quinn here. If you appreciate my content, hit the like button so that the YouTube algorithm can see me. Alright guys, we just got a little bit to talk about today, but honestly the little bit is very exciting. Alright, this is from an interview that Denis Villeneuve gave. He says, "There's no such thing as Dune 1 and Dune 2. It's Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2. I'm sorry, I've been calling it Dune 2, Denis Villeneuve, I'm so sorry." He goes on to say, "We have been hearing in the past few decades that it is not possible to adapt this book, and that it is an impossible task. I think that in the back of the mind of the studio, it's still the same. So the first thing was to prove that there was a beautiful, popular movie that can exist, and I think I proved that." He, of course, has insight data, but I think he's pretty right because the buzz that I've seen around the trailers and stuff has been pretty significant. So he says, "I think that I proved that. Everyone at Warner Brothers and Legendary, they are 100% behind the project. They feel that it would need a really bad outcome at the box office to not have Dune Part 2 because they love the movie. They are proud of the movie, so they want the movie to move forward, and they still did half of it. So, I'm very optimistic." So the budget for Dune has been hovering around $130 million for this first part. So as far as like giant box office movies like this go, that's kind of on the lower end. I mean, it's still a pretty big risk because it's over $100 million, but they spent like $500 million on, the Avengers Endgame Part 1 and then another $500 million on an Endgame Part 2. Like Marvel spends at the very lowest like $200 million per movie. So Dune is like a little bit on the lower end, and there's also been a lot of buzz around this trailer, and there's also movies starting to do good again. Free Guy did very well at the box office, but also that wasn't coming out on HBO Max, but I guess we'll see. But it seems like everyone involved is optimistic, including the studio itself. Now, I have in the past criticized the promotion for this movie, but it seems like about a month ago, the promotion really stepped up. They were airing the trailers during the Olympics. I've been seeing Dune all over the place now, so it really seems like they really have stepped up the marketing, and they're really trying to let people know like this movie is coming out and get people in the seats to go see it. Villeneuve goes on to say, "First of all, the enemy of cinema is the pandemic. That's the thing. We understand that the cinema industry is under tremendous pressure right now. I get that." He says, "The way it happened, I'm still not happy. Frankly, to watch Dune on a television, the best way I can compare it is to drive a speedboat in your bathtub. For me, it's ridiculous. It's a movie that has been made as a tribute to the big screen experience." And I told you guys before that I did get a preview of some of the Dune scenes not too long ago, and I saw it in IMAX, and Denis Villeneuve is pretty much right. It's a totally different experience on the big screen. I mean, you see it in theaters, and then you get it on Blu-ray, I guess, later and watch it at home, but the experience of seeing it in theaters is a whole different level. Like when the worm was coming in the movie, it just felt like the entire earth was shaking and the entire earth was going to break apart and the worm was going to come out of the theater and consume the theater. It was so grand and so epic. So I totally get where he's coming from, but the pandemic is shaking things up for a lot of people. He goes on to say, "I'm writing Part 2 now, and I feel like I'm 8 years old again," he says, flashing like a childlike grin. "That's very uncommon for me. It's the first time I've experienced it where I'm watching one of my movies and I have a moment of deep gratitude, of deep joy. I say, thank you, life, for having allowed me to bring that to the screen." He laughs. "I don't know how other people will feel about it, but me, Denis Villeneuve, when he was 14 years old, thank you." Okay, first of all, he's writing Dune 2. So if he's spending his time on it, this man's time is worth millions of dollars. He's writing Dune 2, so what does that tell you? He seems super optimistic about it, and he's like into it. That's the main thing that I love about this guy. That's the main thing that I love about Denis Villeneuve. He's into it. Every time I've watched an interview or read anything of him talking about Dune, he seems so into it. You got some directors, they adapt stuff and they talk about it, and it's just like, oh, you can just feel the pretension like falling off of them and seeping off of them. They think they're the greatest thing ever. Denis Villeneuve is just trying to satisfy the young teenage version of himself, the young teenage nerdy boy inside of him that loved Dune, and he's trying to bring it to the screen, and that's the most heartwarming thing that I've ever read, honestly. So we can officially say Dune 2 is in the works. It's in the works because he's writing it, so that's super exciting. And I guess on some other news that's not really news, Rebecca Ferguson said something that upset a few people, which I think it's mainly because it's been taken out of context and people really haven't had it explained to them, and there's been other people that have said things and it's kind of inaccurate. So basically, what she says was this book had to be adapted for a modern audience. And she mentions that women in science fiction books in the 60s were typically portrayed a certain way. And she's right about that. But Dune is a better example of the portrayal of women than a lot of other stuff. Like, for example, like Jessica is a huge character in Dune, and the female characters in Dune often are emphasized, especially later on in the book. And then you have like books like, for instance, Larry Niven's Ringworld. Then you get to characters like Tila Brown, who are just there to be bimbos, and she's like literally she's on the mission with them in that book because she's lucky, and that's it. So you know what I mean? But Dune is a much better example of a decent portrayal of women in the 1960s, but I totally get where she's coming from because that is something that did exist in the 1960s. And it's also been floating around that Rebecca Ferguson like hasn't read Dune, and that she's just going on about like how it's sexist while she hasn't read it. Well, actually, in that same interview, she says that she has read most of the book now. She said it was difficult to read because Dune is a difficult book to read if you're not a sci-fi fan. And that's literally all she said. She didn't say that Dune was sexist. She didn't say that Frank Herbert hated women. She said that women were typically portrayed a certain way in the 1960s, and that Dune 2020 had to be adapted for a modern audience. In every other part of the interview, she seems very excited about the movie. She seems very excited about her role, and she respects the source material, and she even points out scenes from the book that she wishes were in the movie that she's pushing to get in part 2. So if you've heard that Rebecca Ferguson said Dune was sexist, I can't find any evidence of that. So that's what I got for you today, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe for more Quinn's ideas. And super excited for Dune 2. Peace out, guys.